Hello, and thank you all for joining. We're going to get started in just a moment to be mindful of everyone's time today. Okay, a big thanks to all that have joined us today. Let's get this webinar kicked off. Today, I have the privilege of hosting our client-only webinar on the Joe Rogan effect, why niche content is an SEO must-have, alongside one of my favorite colleagues and presenters, Mariah Tang. Mariah, our Chief Content Marketing Officer, is a leader in conversion-centered content strategies. The 8-time Content Marketing World Speaker has directed multiple enterprise content projects for major academic centers across the United States. Her areas of expertise include content strategy, writing, subject matter expert and stakeholder interviews, and content marketing initiatives. I will be turning the stage over to Mariah, today's presenter. But first, I'd like to mention that we will save time for any questions that may arise at the end of today's presentation. Please feel free to submit questions via the questions icon in the top right ribbon as you think of them. The chat feature will not be monitored during this presentation. Okay, with that, Mariah, over to you.
Thanks, Corey. Thanks, everybody, for spending your lunch half hour with us today. Let's just kick this thing off. So, controversial guy, controversial topic. Trust me, I heard a lot about it. Just about everybody has heard of Joe Rogan, whether you want to or not. He was a stand-up comedian back in the 90s. Some of us were alive then. Many of us remember those TV days. Now Joe is something of a pop culture icon. You might remember him from news radio, Fear Factor, being a crazy person on the sidelines of UFC fights. But most people today recognize him from his Spotify video podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. Let that picture speak for itself. So before you get mad at me for talking about Joe Rogan, let's just level set here. He is controversial. There's no way around that. He's a controversial fella. He gives disinformation a platform, but he does occasionally throw in some nuggets of truth there. So he gets great audiences from any side of the aisle that you could imagine. He really knows how to draw a crowd, that's for sure. His show is the top podcast on Spotify, 5 years running. So how does Joe do it? People have big imaginations. People love a conspiracy, as you know, but his success really starts from something a lot simpler than that. Our pal Joe has dominated a particular niche on owned media. You might be wondering what owned media is. Don't worry, we'll tell you. It's platforms that you own, that you control, that can't be taken away from your institution. So, blog and newsroom, one example, podcast, another example, email and print newsletters. These are platforms that you own, that you curate, that you distribute, aside from social media, which is a platform owned by someone else where they could yank your access at any moment. These are channels that you own, that you can control the tone, the voice, etc. So the reason we're talking about this today is that in a sea of content that's copied off of AI, copied off of Google, starting to really sound generic as people are pumping out more and more pieces, publishing that niche content on your owned media channels is going to be even more important for SEO than it has been in the past. Joe, like him or not, has pinpointed his audience. He has built an owned media empire. He started his Joe Rogan Experience on a free personal podcast, and then Spotify later picked that up. So he grew that audience from grassroots, and then he got that large platform attention. So that's what the media calls the Joe Rogan effect. It's really about knowing your audience, sharing the right content, and winning those SEO conversions. So again, no matter what you think of Mr. Rogan, his topics, his guest, he would be considered an owned media success story, and your brand can achieve that type of success as well using owned media. There's a 6-step strategy that we're going to share today with a lot of great examples about how you can launch and successfully run an owned media program. So these are those 6 steps, and without further ado, we're going to jump right in. Number 1, we want to start with identifying our approach. Now, what does that mean? There are lots of different types of content that you can put out there. We ran through a quick list: blog, email, podcast. Whatever platform you choose is a little bit secondary to your approach as an interviewer or a content creator. So there are 3 different roles that really we see often in higher ed and healthcare, and honestly across a lot of industries. So you will have your subject matter expert. Examples of this are Mel Robbins and her podcast, or the Did I Say That Out Loud podcast that Stu Eddins, our colleague, and myself run. There's the active listener style, where you're asking pointed questions and kind of sitting back and just listening. Examples of that would be Rich Roll, he's a fitness influencer, or The Application with Allison Tercio, which many of you might actually subscribe to. And then there's the combination approach, just kind of depending on the topic, depending on who your guest would be or who your expert would be. A couple examples of those are the Andrew Huberman podcast or Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO with Jamie Hunt. Many of you probably also subscribe to Jamie's podcast. So there are a lot of different ways that you can either serve as that subject matter expert or take the approach of asking questions and getting those answers and kind of mediating those answers for your audience. There's no, hey, this one is better. It just really depends on the content you have and the team that you're working with. So those 3 roles can work for any type of content: podcast, blog, email, whatever platform you feel resonates best with your team's work and your audience's desires. Any of those 3 roles can work. So we want to give you a little tidbit here. This is the interviewing process that our teams use when we work with SMEs, subject matter experts. So just don't worry about taking a screenshot or anything. We'll send you this PDF, but I wanted to run through this really quickly. There are 3 key components to conducting a great interview. You want to have a very clear process where your SME is actively prepared. So they need to know the expectations, what we're going to use that interview for, and how much time they can be expected to commit to this. You want to do your homework about that subject. You don't want to come in asking basic questions. The example we often give in healthcare is we don't want to walk in and say, what's a heart attack? We want to ask questions about, hey, this new treatment has come out. Can you tell us about your experience? Getting really specific. And then don't be afraid to let those pregnant pauses hang out there. Sometimes people get uncomfortable in silence and they'll give you more information than you might have expected. Be yourself. Really pose those intuitive questions as they pop into your mind. All right, the next step is to choose your niche, and this can get really complicated for big institutions. There are so many bunny holes you could go down, but this is a good starting point if you're really working to either rein in an existing content program or start a new one. Think about the unusual or very specific questions that you can answer, that your institution and subject matter experts can answer. What are some stories that only your institution can tell? Whether you're in higher ed, healthcare, or working at an agency, there are plenty of those types of stories. I'm going to give you an example here of the Cleveland Clinic. They started their Health Essentials blog back in 2012. They are, I think we can all agree, one of the powerhouses in healthcare content marketing. And the reason for that is multifactorial, but the reason we're going to start with today is because when they began their content, they started in a lane. They went really high level, talking about particular disease types and daily health and wellness topics. And then they started to go a little bit wider, a little bit deeper. We flash forward to today, to 2025, 13 years later. Now, just about anything you want to ask about, that you can find that on Cleveland Clinic. And there are many other institutions, Mayo, many of the partners that we work with on a regular basis that do the same type of program. They start with the services or programs that really stand out for their organization, and then they build based on what other individuals are asking that are adjacent to those programs. So very smart content strategy. One thing I would caution you, especially if you're just starting out, is to not try to cover everything. We always say you can't please everybody, you're not pizza. So try to stick within your lane at first and then see where that lane takes you. You could end up with a 10-lane highway by the end of your program, just depending on what people are looking for. So again, start with your priorities and, of course, an enthusiastic subject matter expert. That person will become your brand champion, and you can go wild with this individual. They'll start coming up with ideas once they see your content taking off. They can give you credible information that you don't have to worry about, is it okay if we talk about this? And better, they will be your cheerleader, not just for you and telling you you did a wonderful job, but for everybody else in the department and then further out into the institution. And sooner or later, everybody is going to want a slice of that owned media pie. So get ready to have people knocking down your door. All right, number 3, pinpointing your ideal audience. There are a lot of ways that you can go about this. And one of our favorite tools that we use is personas. So an easy way to create a persona is to start with your enrollment or your appointment data. Who are the individuals that you're serving? You want to look at the type of content that those individuals might need in their journey and then start branching out. What are some of the questions they'll ask beyond that? What are some of the things they'll be worried about? Some of the things that maybe they'll be really excited about if this service that we offer works out for them. You can feed those types of general information into AI tools to create really simple personas that help guide your content. This is a great preliminary research tool. I'm not going to read this, but we're going to give you this 2-step persona creation prompt. So when we in our teams were working through these prompts, we started with Gemini. We love Google. We're a Google partner, so it just was a natural fit for us. We wrote out this lengthy, very specific step-by-step prompt asking for specific information about a student group, a young man from a certain area with certain interests, specific reading levels, all kinds of different things, asking about the emotional triggers for that individual. And then we asked it to create a table using emojis to make it really nice and visual. We found using the prompts that we put together that Gemini's information was more specific than ChatGPT based on our prompt. So we started in that platform. And then unfortunately, the free version of Gemini doesn't really make pretty tables the way we expected. So that's why we added on this second step. So we took the information that we prompted into ChatGPT, made a copy of that output, pasted it into ChatGPT with the request to make us a pretty table. So it made this visual table for us. It has some nice emojis set out, lovely little breakdown of all of that content. And we feel like we can trust this output to be one that is original because we put in all of the details ourselves, and one that we can easily copy and paste into whatever marketing materials or team information that we need to put together to work on content. So easy step to help with the research. Just a reminder, we do not recommend putting PHI, personal customer data, including names and phone numbers. None of that should be going into those AI tools, especially in free accounts. It's basically just dumping that public or private information into a public sphere. So please don't do that. Always use generalized, anonymized prompts and use them for ideation and research only, not to write that content that you're supposed to use to make yourself differentiated from other competitors. A couple more ideas to come up with those very niche content topics that your audience is asking for. There are a few tools that we typically recommend. One, of course, people know about Moz. We just talked about ChatGPT and Google Trends. These are all really simple tools that you can use with no training needed, except for learning how to push those buttons to come up with topical ideas that individuals using your personas might be looking for. You can also go right to the data source with our Looker Studio organic search query dashboards. We can build these for you at a relatively quick rate. Just tell us what you're looking for, and we can build these to show you exactly what queries people are entering into Google and what they're finding on your website. So super helpful to create content calendars. You're going to hear me say this so many times today, but your goal is to create content that answers the questions that people are asking. So while you'll, of course, have to do some of those pieces because this physician or this faculty member requires it, most of what you're creating as a content marketing group should be directly focused on that audience and their specific needs. See, I'm saying it again. I told you I'd be saying it a lot. Oftentimes, we as marketers shy away from the low volume search queries and questions, and I would encourage you to follow what Andy Crestodina recommends. Start attacking those low volume questions. Get into that niche because your team and your institution may be the only ones addressing that question. And when people are looking for that information, you're going to rise to the top, whether it's an AI search or Google. And as you own those small niches, you start building that credibility of, hey, they can get really specific. I bet they can help with XYZ as well. So it's a brand standpoint, but it's also really at the end of the day, serving that audience in a very specific way. How do you drill down to that niche? You start with a great big idea and then you refine it. This is an exercise that we walked through at Content Marketing World. We had the audience asking, then what? Then what? Or so what? They got a little crazy, but it's kind of fun to do this exercise. You ask those questions of yourself in a topic until you can't ask any more questions. When you get to the end of that road, that's your niche topic. And we'll show you a little example here. Taking courses at our college before going to the local big university is a good idea for some majors. That's a statement. That's not really an opinion. That's not really anything that would inspire a click. So we want to ask why. Why is it a good idea? You can save money and finish college faster. Compelling, right? But how does that happen? We offer this great 2+2 transfer program with Local Big U for allied health students. They're getting really specific here. Our credits cost less and they're guaranteed to transfer. There's your niche. Easy as that. It takes a little bit of thought work, but the more you drill down, the more specific you can get. All right, we're already at number 4. Thanks for hanging with us here. This is the fun part where we get to show you some examples. So now you're on to the creation part. You've got your niche, you've got your platform and your approach and your audience. Now we're here to create content. We're going to show you some examples of those different approach types. So if you remember, the first one we talked about was subject matter expert. This is an example of that approach using a blog. So our friends at UT Southwestern typically byline their stories that their marketing team and that we help with ghost write. They give the SME the byline, and then the article is tailored to their personality, their expertise, and their examples. So you can see the subject matter expert leads it, the marketing team bears the work, and then it gets published out on their website that they own. Then it's distributed elsewhere. This is another great example. Our friends at Houston Methodist, they create this publication 3 times a year. It's called Leading Medicine. It's published online and it's mailed out to homes all around the Houston area. So this is another example of that SME voice where they give the not necessarily a byline, but a real introduction to this person. They put the SME's picture with their credentials and their name, and it's really personal. It's a nice personal feel. So it feels like Dr. Patel is giving you this information. So a good use of subject matter expert. Here's an example of the active listener-led podcast. We talked about Allison Tercio's experience earlier. She's the AVP for enrollment and marketing at Siena. So she's actually a subject matter expert as well, but she brings in individuals who are in specific roles that have specific expertise, and she brings those personal insights from herself into those interviews. So it's kind of that, she knows what questions to ask. She asks them very pointedly and then lets her guests expound upon them. And another example, this is a combination of static and video. This is Illinois Storied. It's a brand storytelling website that they've put out. So it's a mix of that first person subject matter expert, some brand focused insights, and some Q&A interview style pieces. So you can see whatever approach style you feel more comfortable with, you can get there with the platform that you choose. So number 5, sharing where your people are. And this is where we get into distribution. So like it or not, this makes my little writer and editor heart happy. Text-based stories are still the top. Video and podcast right behind it. It's amazing to see the growth that video and podcast continue to have. At some point, it will probably topple, but right now in search, text-based stories are still pretty much the top. So like we said, start high level on that broad topic, go deeper on those niche subtopics, upcycle that content as other media. So break apart those blog interviews. Put them out as podcast snippets within your website. Showcase those videos on social media. Really take those bits and pieces and distribute them through your email newsletters. So if you do it really smartly, you're going to interlink all of those pieces, embed them all together so that the user has a really flexible, streamlined experience and that your content surfaces in more than one place and is very findable. It's the old methodology of create once and publish everywhere. You're going outside of your own spaces. You're sharing your content where people are actively looking for entertainment and information. And at the end of the day, you're bringing them back to your website to convert. So here's a great example from our pals over at Be Well. They are the New Mexico Health Marketplace Exchange. So they do a great job of this. They publish blog stories on their owned media. They create videos that go along with those blog stories and publish them both on their website and on social media. And then they also include snippets of those videos and shorter renditions of them on YouTube Shorts. So they're covering all of those different bases with this great information that they got from one central hub. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do with niche. All right, last step, we want to measure and optimize all the time. And what does that mean when you're looking at owned media? There's a million different metrics that you could look at. We're going to focus on just these 5 today. Look at what matters to your stakeholders and start there. These are 5 that we typically recommend. So how many stories are we telling? Is it enough? Is it the right speed? Is our team underwater? You need to do what works for you and what makes your audience happy. But primarily, your responsibility is to take care of your team. Reach out for help if you need it, but make sure that the work is attainable. You're looking at reach and impressions. Are people seeing our stories and our outreach tactics effective? Do we need to put a few dollars behind some of these stories? You're looking at ultimately conversions. Conversions is not the primary focus of owned media. It's to get your name out there. But when it happens and you can attribute it to your work, that feels really darn good. You're looking at relevant site traffic. Again, that goes with the conversions. A lot of the time with content marketing, you're going to see a person come in, they're going to get what they need, and then they're going to bounce out. That is okay. And as they're getting more and more familiar with your brand, and as you get nicher and nicher and nicher, you're going to see those conversions rise. So don't freak out about a high bounce rate. It's pretty normal with content marketing. And as we said before, brand sentiment is very, very important. It's something that you should expect with your content marketing. Here's another couple of quick examples as our time is winding down here. Our friends at Harper College in Illinois did this great blog story about Lyft Pass so that individuals who go to their college can partner with Lyft to get reduced rates on their rides to school. They published this story, they got in on the ground floor with this, and they are outranking really big institutions for this content because it answers that niche question, can I get cheap Lyft rides to college? They rank really high on Google. They continue to. We checked it again right before this webinar. And they also won an AI overview snippet for this story. For that reason, it's very niche, it's very specific, and it tells that unique original story. This is another example from the healthcare world. UT Southwestern had a similar story. They won the AI overview for Pulsar, which is a type of radiation therapy technique. It's very niche content. Most of the writing out there about it, most of the videos are very clinical, and this story takes it down to more of a consumer level. All right, wrapping up here so we can get to your questions. None of these 6 steps are brand new. We haven't shared anything here that we invented or made up, but the problem lies that most brands don't really take content marketing seriously, even with all of these great metrics, and they should. It's only becoming more important. And if you do that, your audience and your institution will be pleasantly surprised. So thank you so much for your attention. Corey, do you have some questions coming in?
Yeah, we do. We have a few here. So if you're open to some questions, we'll go ahead and get started.
Let's do
Uh,
it.
I'll, I'll actually answer the first one. This person is asking about PHI that we referenced earlier in the deck related to entering information into ChatGPT or another AI platform. So PHI does mean just protected health information, but anything else that's related to customer data, so names, emails, things like that, you'll probably want to leave out of an AI platform for the reasons that Mariah stated earlier.
Good
Uh,
question. The acronyms get me every time.
Okay, so here's a couple more. This one is, are there any rules of thumb regarding the length of blog articles to positively impact SEO?
I love this question. So for a long time, lengthy articles, we're talking like 3,000, 4,000 words, were really the queen of Google. The algorithms love that length, and that's still true. But what we typically tell people is the content needs to be structured first and foremost. So using proper headings, using the type of language and reading level that your audience uses, and then it needs to tell a compelling story. So we generally say less than 2,000 words, usually over 750. So if you're hitting that kind of ballpark, you're probably answering the question with enough depth that you can get somebody to the next step. So as you're reviewing your content, some really niche topics might actually be much shorter than that. We always say the content needs to be as long as it needs to be to express the point and get the person to the next step. And I know that's not super helpful, but aim for that 750 to 2,000 word range if you have a fairly complex question.
Great. Okay. This one is, we've published a lot of great student testimonials on YouTube and are thinking about turning them into blog posts. Have you had any luck using AI to transform video content into written content?
Yeah, that is a great idea, and it's a wonderful use of AI. Your videos that you own are already out there in the public sphere, so you don't have to worry about plagiarism or, making it sound non-brand. One thing you can do is upload the entire video if you have that raw file into an AI tool and ask it for a transcript and then ask it for a summary. It's kind of a multi-step prompt, or you can build a really complicated prompt up front to try to get the information you need. Some of the tools might be able to scrape the actual URL. So if you feed in the URLs to the tool, it can give you a summary of each of those. One thing that we have used in multiple projects is if you have an interview that hasn't gone live yet, you can load it into otter.ai or a similar tool. It's a subscription model, so we worry less about that the anonymity component because it's secure login and all of that good stuff. But it provides a really nice transcript that you can break down by subheadings of users and things like that. It can identify who's speaking at the time, and it can also give you a really nice summary of what the individual talked about and some talking points. So I wouldn't recommend just copying what it kicks out, whatever tool you use, what it kicks out and using that as your content, but it's definitely a great starting point so that you don't have to rewatch all of those videos and you can get the key points.
Fantastic. Okay, it looks like we have maybe one more. So, how do you know when you have the right number of personas? I feel like we have many types of students here, um, but we don't have the manpower to speak to everyone. How do we find balance?
Yeah, I love this question too. And it gets down to that niche and specificity and priority. So if you say, let's say your student body is 50% adult learners and 40% transfer students and maybe 10% traditional. I know that's kind of silly. Math is not my thing, content is my thing. I would start with that biggest audience and then look at the questions and fears and concerns and worries that that biggest audience has. Start there and then work down in priority to the next group, maybe 2 to 3 per just to start. That should cover at least the basics of what each of those groups might be seeking or might be concerned about. From there, you can dovetail down into more like mini personas based on specific questions. So I don't think you need, 10, 20 female, male, certain ages for every single question, but just get those bulk priority services aligned with those priority questions, and you should be able to get, 10, maybe even less personas to work with across your different media.
All right. Well, well done today, Mariah. Really appreciate you going through this with everybody. Any parting words?
This was really fun. Thank you all so much. We're going to send this video out and the presentation deck. So if you have any questions, feel free to click through the links and give us a holler anytime. We're always happy to help you with your content strategy.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.
Bye bye.